is still $287 more expensive than Allianz 24. One agent said, quote, "After 35 years with Allianz, I have given up." That may have been the intention all along. The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday agreed to consider an appeal from the Travelers Insurance Companies, which is seeking Supreme Court intervention to bar individual asbestos claims relating to a 1986 settlement of a group of such claims against Johns Manville. Travelers asked the Supreme Court to overturn a ruling from the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New York that had permitted a new set of Johns Manville claims to go forward. Travelers was exposed to asbestos claims through its insurance policies with Johns Manville. In 1986, of course, a federal bankruptcy court approved a plan that placed funds in a trust to cover claims against Johns Manville. According to Travelers in its filing with the court, the Second Circuit's decision undermines important principles of judicial finality. Several new suits were filed in 2002 claiming Johns Manville sought to conceal the dangers of asbestos. In court filings, Travelers said the new suits were barred by the 1986 agreement. A federal bankruptcy judge agreed with the Travelers, but the Second Circuit said that the new claims were allowed. The case, if you're interested in looking up, is Travelers Indemnity Company versus Bailey. We reported the other day about State Farm down in Miami in front of an administrative law judge seeking a 67% rate hike. Well, we have the answer today. That state ALJ found State Farm Florida's insurance demand for higher rates was based on often ambiguous contradictory evidence and rejected the bid for the average statewide 67% increase in homeowner insurance rates. After the Florida Insurance Commissioner rejected State Farm's initial 47% rate hike, State Farm then went to the Division of Administrative Hearings, saying that its analysis of its risk and projections of losses actually supported a 67% increase. However, State ALJ Daniel Manry ruled that much of the evidence the insurer presented to support its demand for higher rates was ambiguous, contradictory, and lacked credibility. For instance, he said, State Farm said it needed to raise rates in part because hefty discounts it was giving homeowners for measures to mitigate against heavy winds or cutting into premium revenues. Yet when Manry asked for specifics, the company couldn't provide them. The judge noted that State Farm's premiums are declining, in part because it's renewing fewer policies or removing or deleting wind coverage from policies, saying that the number of policies State Farm planned not to renew has now risen up to 85,000. In a statement, State Farm said that it realizes, quote, the potential that this causes difficulty-wise for our customers, especially in light of these tough economic times. However, it's the only responsible choice. State Farm company spokesman said that no decision for appeal has been made. In his decision, Judge Manry also said he couldn't determine whether the high cost of reinsurance, which the insurer said also justified higher rates, was reasonable. Judge Manry said he was troubled by the company's purchase of reinsurance to cover a probable loss of $9.25 billion, even though State Farm noted that the decreased number of policies plus savings from wind mitigation measures have reduced the probable loss to about $7.1 billion. State Farm paid $842 million for reinsurance coverage this year. The biggest chunk, some $549 million, went to State Farm Mutual, the company's parent company in Illinois. The judge noted that State Farm Florida is the legal entity that the parent company chose to do business in Florida, but they're essentially the same company. He said dealings between the Florida company and its parents might be, and I'm going to quote here, sham transactions, end quote, that could distort the true cost of reinsurance and credit provided by State Farm Mutual to the Florida company and could allow the insurer to derive a rate advantage. We've been reporting over the past year about Siemens, Europe's largest engineering company, and the prospective fine it faces for insider trading, actually, and for bribery. Well, it's now been resolved somewhat because U.S. prosecutors are proposing a fine of $800 million to settle bribery charges. This fine is smaller than what analysts and investors had estimated. As a result, Siemens stock has gained as much as 4.5% today in Europe. The Munich-based company faces a $450 million U.S. fine and will have to forfeit $350 million in profit. Siemens paid kickbacks to win contracts for transportation in Venezuela, mobile telephone networks in Bangladesh, power plants in Israel, and air traffic control systems in Russia, according to prosecutors. The company allegedly paid some $1.36 billion in bribes to government officials and concealed them using off-book accounts. The U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Taylor said in information filed in Washington, Siemens wants to wrap this up as soon as possible. The bribery scandal was first disclosed back in November of 2006. The company put aside €1 billion to cover the charges. So this is well below what they had been planning. Most of the news regarding President Bush has to do with the shoe being thrown at him by the Iraqi journalist. Suffice to say that if an Iraqi journalist had thrown a shoe at Saddam Hussein, that individual would be minus his head at this point. So there is something to be said about what the United States has been doing in Iraq. The man is being questioned and will probably be released. However, on Air Force One flying back to the U.S., President Bush made some news. He gave some public reassurance to the three American auto companies, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. He said an abrupt bankruptcy for car makers could be devastating for the economy. He said, we're now in the process of working with the stakeholders on a way forward. We're not quite ready to announce that yet. He said this will not be a long process because of the economic fragility of the situation. So that's some news there. We're expecting that something will come out sometime later this afternoon, actually, or probably tomorrow. The United Auto Workers said that they have not had any discussions with the White House, even though their nemesis from last week, Republican Senator Bob Corker, who did hold up the whole deal, said that he spoke with the White House yesterday and said no decision has been made. Apparently the president is indicating that he will act in favor of providing the lifeline to them from the TARP. Stock market is still down about 70 points. We'll go to a word from our sponsors and come back with the rest of the news.
From prehistoric time to today, man's progress has been marked by his ability to fashion tools and use them to his advantage. From early humans making tools from stone, man evolved and was soon trading with other men. Money evolved, and tools such as the abacus to handle complex money transactions were developed. By the end of the 19th century, machines such as the cash register began to appear. 100 years later, we have even better computer-driven machines which track stock, change prices, and automatically reorder. Meanwhile, the reinsurance industry has failed to embrace man's drive for progress. The reinsurance industry today would be as familiar to practitioners from the 1800s as it is to modern underwriters. An underwriter or broker from 1800 would settle nicely into today's business. That is, until now. For the reinsurance industry, pivot point changes everything. Soon it will be understood that the period before pivot point was as dark as the caveman period was before the abacus. Come and see for yourself if you don't believe. After a demonstration, you will understand what is possible.
Now to the casualty part of the show. Earlier today, a moderate 5.3 earthquake struck off the coast of the Japanese island of Honshu. No tsunami warning was immediately issued. There were no reports of damage. It hit at 6:29 a.m. local time. The epicenter was about 180 miles from Morioka. There was another earthquake on Saturday, this one in Greece. This was a 5.2. It was in the central part of the country. about 6 miles south of the city of Lamia, or about 85 miles northwest of